Welcome to Small Biz Life, episode 66, Podcast Basics.
Whoop. Does this sound familiar?
Oh my God, I have so much to do today.
Don't forget to breathe.
But I have almost 400 emails in my inbox and 30 phone calls to make.
Have you looked into getting a virtual assistant yet?
Oh, and I need to schedule all my social media posts.
Did you drink anything today?
I had coffee.
Did you eat today?
Did I mention coffee's a bean?
This is Small Biz Life.
Hey guys, welcome to another exciting episode of Small Biz Life.
This week it's action-packed and ready to roll.
You're always action-packed and ready to roll. So, if you are a returning listener to the show, thank you so much for being here again this week.
Yes, we truly appreciate each and every time you listen.
And if you're new to the show, my name's Kristen Ingram.
And I'm Jeffrey W. Ingram.
And I'm a CPA and small business builder.
And I am a IT analyst and business process destroyer.
And fantasy writer.
And fantasy writer. I'm all kinds of weird things.
Yeah. It's an interesting mix in our household. So we're a husband and wife team, small business owners, helping you navigate this journey that we call the small biz life, because this is not a 9-to-5 job.
Yeah, and the thing is, when we're out looking for a podcast on how, on how to do online businesses, we found there's a lot of great podcasts out there, but we didn't find any that really helped explain how to do the business side of it. It was always more how to either do, a marketing or how to do a type of outreach, but, or lots of great inspirational stuff out there, but there's nothing really to help you with the weeds of small business.
Yeah, so that's why we started.
Yeah.
And you guys have just been absolutely phenomenal. We've been asking you to hit the subscribe button every week, and we can see that you guys are doing that because the downloads have been fantastic. You guys are sharing it with new people. You're bringing people into our Facebook group, and we really appreciate that.
Yeah.
So you guys are the ones that keep us doing this every single week.
Mm-hmm. It makes giving away all of this great content free.
Exactly.
Easy.
So we have a lot of people who approach us that ask us, how do you start a podcast? And I get tagged in a lot of posts around Facebook on, when people are asking about how to start a podcast. So we've been doing this show for about 16 months.
Yeah.
And you've been doing your show for almost 2 years.
It was January 15th of 2015 was when I started.
Yeah, so you're just short of 2 years. So we've been doing this for a while. We're putting out 2 shows a week now, one for Small Biz Life and one for World Builders Anvil. And, I think that we've done, fairly well.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to talk about some hacks you can do to try and help yourself along the way. That was never really our focus. But there are things that you can do along the way when you start off that can give you an advantage if you have the time to do it, if you have the desire to do it. I'm a big believer in organic growth over hack growth, because hack growth does not give you fans who really want to interact with you.
Right. And you're going to, the thing I find too, that with hack growth, you will get like those big numbers in the beginning and then they're going to trail off.
Yeah.
Because it will get you in front of people, but they may not be the right people. Mm-hmm. And so, we're going to kind of talk about some of the things that we've done to build our audience along the way. And if you're involved with the brand, right, and you interact with us, then you see what we're doing.
Yeah. I would suggest, if you're really serious about podcasting, do check out John Lee Dumas's Podcaster's Paradise. That's kind of what helped to get us started. And an invaluable resource. Don't necessarily make the mistake a lot of people do and try and become John Lee Dumas. There's only one of him. But actually, if you listen to what he says, it's great advice. If you try and mimic and be the next John Lee Dumas, you're probably going to be frustrated.
Right. So, I think the first step in podcasting, if this is something that you want to do, is you have to listen to podcasts.
Yes.
go out there, see what is in the same area. And that's kind of, that's how we came up with Small Biz Life, because we were listening to business podcasts and we found that there are great marketing podcasts. Yeah. There are, great online business podcasts where they're interviewing
social
people.
Media or
social media. But there's nothing that really kind of talked about the struggle that small business owners go through and kind of helping you grow all aspects of your small biz life.
And it's one of those things, it's the same mistake I think that a lot of entrepreneurs make, is they get focused on on the business stuff, which is easy to focus on. That's why you want to do it. If you want to do a podcast, it's because you want to do it, you want to share the content. But the problem is, as an overall scheme of your business, people sometimes forget that there is the other parts, and people typically need more help with the other things, except for maybe marketing. Marketing really usually helps everyone, but most of these other things that the shows are focused on to inspire you, it's great to have that, but you need the help to get through the accounting and through the technical issues so you can actually focus on the work you want to do.
Right, exactly. So, I think the first thing that, once you've kind of gone through and you've listened to other podcasts and you've kind of figured out, okay, this is where there might be a need, you've got to figure out what your topic is.
Yeah.
And I think you've got to do this in conjunction with figuring out who your ideal listener is.
Mm-hmm. And that's really important. And the thing is, when you get into niche marketing, which is a great way to run a podcast, is we speak to a specific individual whenever we do the show. Our products that we come up with, the different things that we do are all speaking to an individual. They're not always the same individual. Don't get trapped in the thought that because you have an avatar and you have a niche that you can't speak to other people or have even marketing plans to try and bring in other people who surround your ideal listener. But you need the ideal listener so there's some consistency to the show. So when you make decisions on how you want to approach the next topic, you know that Janice or Fred or whatever the name of your avatar for the show is, what they want to hear. And remember, it's only outreach. And you're not going to do well if your show from week to week totally shifts avatar because of the topic that you're on.
Right. And I think, one of the things that's been really rewarding for our show is the number of you that have reached out to us either through the Facebook group at facebook.com/group/smallbizlife, or have emailed us or reached out to us on social media and said, oh my God, this episode was just for me.
Yeah. And it's funny too, because we kind of look at the person, what we know, and we're like, is this our avatar? And a lot of times is. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's not.
So that's the thing. So, when you're developing your topic and you're developing your avatar, you've got to be thinking, is this something that is sustainable for the long term? Because podcasting, you can do special topics podcasts. Like, these are really good for book releases or product releases. Like, if you want to do, an 8 or 10 episode run and get it up to new and noteworthy, that's a really good strategy for releases. But if you're going to do a podcast,
a sustained podcast,
right, you have to make sure that there are enough topics for you to talk about.
Yeah. And really, this is one where doing a content calendar up front, make sure you have at least 52 weeks of content planned before you record.
And really all that means is you have 52 topics.
Yes, you don't have all of the research done for it. You don't have all of the episodes sketched out. It just, you have the topics that you're going to talk about for 52 weeks.
Right. And we have that for our show. We talked about that when we talked about content creation.
And we've never gone under 52 weeks, I don't think.
I don't think so. Well, it's funny because a lot of times something else will hit us, whether it's something that our group is talking about or something that I'm seeing a lot on social media that small businesses are talking about, and we'll do an episode on that instead. Yeah. So I don't think we've gone back to the list probably in 4 months.
Yes.
But we know that if we can't think of something, we have that list.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And one of the other things to keep in mind too is this advice is to get started in podcasting. Understand that it's probably not gonna end up after the first year being what it was when you start. If you listen to your audience, if you pay attention, you're going to probably slowly change over time. You're going to get to what's a pretty good format, but even then, you're going to change your format, occasionally in minor ways.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, if you look at this show originally, we had like news of the week and we had app of the week, which I know people miss app of the week. That might be coming back. As related to whatever we're talking about, though.
Yeah.
But the show has evolved from like all these little segments into one topic of the week. And so I think that first of all, it makes it a little bit easier on us.
Yeah.
But I think it brings more fluidity to the show. I think that it's easier for people to pick like, oh, I want to listen to this topic.
Yeah.
And it also allows the shows to have more longevity.
Yeah.
Because if you're talking about specific things that are in the news right now, and sometimes we do that, the show can get stale quickly.
Yeah.
Because as things change, as, that thing is no longer in the news, then people won't go back and listen to those episodes.
When you get that new subscriber and they get to that episode, they're like, oh, wait, that's old news. And they skip it.
Right. So, but thinking about like future topics and this applies to like whether you're going to blog or you're going to YouTube or whatever content you're going to put out, do you have enough things that you can talk about, write about, do videos about in order to give yourself, the longevity to do this? I mean, I'll tell you, like with Payment Free Life, when we got out of debt, I was kind of like, all right, I'm not really passionate about this anymore.
Yeah.
And the site's still up there and it still gets traffic. And, the YouTube channel for it actually does fairly well. But it's just not something that like I'm interested in writing about every week anymore.
Which is also a thing to consider too, that when you start, understand that you don't want to stop something like this once you start it, especially once you have an audience built. You don't want to go, I'm just going to start a new podcast. I'm going to get a new website and do all of that. If you get to that point in an existing podcast with your audience, start transitioning the show from format A to format B. You can go all at once, or you can do it. Understand that you're always going to gain and lose listeners every week, or however often you put out your content. And sometimes they'll end up coming back later, and other times they might never come back again. But understand that there will always be an attrition of people. So it's important to realize that part of this is you're always looking to grow it.
Right. And I think, one of the things that I disagree with some of the big names in podcasts on is they say, niche down, niche down, niche down, niche down, niche down. Don't niche yourself into such a limited area that you run out of stuff to talk about.
That's why I believe you niche via avatar, not necessarily via topic. You're trying to present your perspective on something to someone individually through conversation, obviously, because there's no video. You can't dance around in a podcast or just make the audio really bad. Unless you have really good mics, I guess.
Well, in a lot of the podcast communities I'm in, there is a lot of podcast burnout because people have niched down so far that they're like, I don't want to talk about this thing anymore.
Yep.
And that's one of the cool things with our show is that because we're talking about the life of a small business owner, I don't think we're ever going to run out of topics.
No, and if we get sick of talking about one type of topic, it will probably go on the back burner for a bit, and then we'll get back to it when we want to, or we're inspired to. So we have a lot of things we can talk about and keep the show in a consistent format.
Right. Yeah. So let's kind of talking about that next. So as you're kind of brainstorming with, your topics and your avatar, I think that it's important to think about how consistent you want to be. How often are you going to put out new episodes? How long are those episodes going to be? Are you going to do an interview-based show? Or is it going to be a topical-based show? So are you going to interview people? Or are you going to talk about a topic?
And here's a word of warning for interview-based shows. they can be good for attracting new audience if you take advantage of it. You know, if you have the big name people who want to talk about the topic that is poignant to your audience, it's going to drive traffic to your show. But you got to keep it. You got to take advantage of those big names when you get them. The problem is it's going to take you more time than you think. Even if you come up with a good flow for an interview show, there's always going to be technical difficulties. You know, expect that whatever the length of the show is that it would take you to record by yourself, it will take at least twice as much time to do it. And always tell the person you're going to interview it's going to be this at the latest. Because, you know, it's kind of like the reservations at a restaurant, you know. You don't want to tell a very busy, important person it's going to take an hour, and then because of technical difficulties, maybe even on their end, it now takes an hour and a half or 2 hours because you've just taken an hour of their time.
Right. And the other thing with an interview-based show is that you're going to be recording a lot sooner in advance than the shows. You're going to want to make sure that you've got shows in the can, pre-recorded, in case something happens.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're doing a show on your own, then
if something hits the news, it's a lot easier to bring it up.
Right, exactly. So that's kind of one of the things. You know, the other thing that I would have you look at is, do you want to have a co-host or are you going to self-host? Mm-hmm. My personal preference, and this is just me, I find that I have a greater bandwidth for length of the show if it's a co-hosted show. Yeah. If it's one person talking into the mic, I like shorter episodes.
Yeah. I also think too that if it's one person talking to a mic, the only way you can get around that is sort of higher production quality. And I don't mean that in the sense of, oh, the sound's just slightly better, but you know, it's the ones that mix in those moments and use music or other things that raise the production value of the show to a higher level than what a lot of podcasts are, which is two people bantering or a couple people bantering. You can have a little bit lower quality production value, which will save you a lot of time in editing.
And I think, you know, because one of the few shows I listen to that has a single host is Remodeling Clay by Clay Shaver. Mm-hmm. And what he tends to do is he has like segments in his show typically. And that works.
Yeah.
And so I can do 45 minutes to an hour with Clay a week.
He's a well-formatted show.
Right.
Yeah.
And because of the format of his show, it breaks everything up. Most of the solo shows I listen to are 15 to 20 minutes.
Yeah.
You know, because there's no breaks in the show.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think people always comment about the banter in our show. Yeah. And I think that makes it easier for people to listen a little bit longer.
And a lot of times, no matter what the subject is, a little banter can help lighten the mood, or you can use the banter to actually bring it more serious. You know, you have to have good chemistry with the person you're hosting with so that, you know, if they're trying to make it more serious because the topic's more serious and you want to cover it that way, that you can work off of each other's facial expressions like, are you still talking? Yap away, sir.
I do that. I mean, I yap too much. But the thing with having a co-host, though, is that if the co-host gets sick or the co-host is on vacation, you've got to make sure that you've got shows that are, you know, pre-recorded.
In the can, as we like to call it.
In the can.
In the Ingram lexicon, because no one else thought of that.
So it's, you know, it's easier for us because we live together.
Yeah.
So we can kind of say like, hey, it's Sunday night. We don't have a show. We need to record a show. I don't think we've ever gone that late before, but usually Sunday mornings we record for Monday's show. We're getting a little bit better at that, though. It's actually Friday that we're recording.
We're way ahead of schedule now.
So, but we've never been really good unless we're going on vacation of like having shows in the can.
But this also leads into the idea of a show flow. It's a very important thing to have, especially early on. Even if you're self-hosting, is this idea of how you want the flow of a show to go. And for a topic show, like what I typically do is I have a series of bullet points I put down. Those are my minimal show notes. And if you go to like my older episodes, that's all I gave because I had very little time. I was doing 3 a week, which was insane. And even though they were shorter, it's insane.
Yeah, and we'll talk about kind of what goes into a show, but when you're thinking about, your consistency, how often are you going to release a show? It is better to start less frequently. And then if you get into the hang of it for a while and you think so if you start with once a week and then you've done this for 6 months and you go, I really want to do 2 shows a week, maybe start putting out like some special episodes.
Bonus, double it up. So double Monday this week, and see if you can sustain it. And if you can, upgrade your frequency. It's a lot harder to downgrade your frequency. And when it comes to frequency, I'm a believer that unless it's a very high quality show, it probably should come out weekly at a minimum. I know some people say that you could do monthly, and some people are successful doing that. But once again, I think it's more your NPR style kind of, well executed story based things that they have a season and they release their episodes maybe over a weekly stretch, but only for part of the year because it takes them a lot longer to put a show together. There's so much noise out there, it's easy to lose the attention of your audience.
Right. And this is the same as blogging, right? Consistency is the key. So figure out what you can handle. And most shows come out once a week.
Yeah.
There are some people that are doing daily shows, but they're very short typically. If you're doing, most of the daily shows I see coming out are like 5 minutes.
5 to 10
and
minutes.
There's no show notes.
Yeah. Well, unless you're a big boy like a John Lee Dumas, where you can afford to have people do it for you.
Right. But typically those people are recording way far in advance.
Because if he gets sick for a week, he can't miss a week.
Right. And then they're handing it off to their staff, and their staff is doing all the post-production stuff.
Yep. They have other people doing the production side, and which let's keep moving towards that.
Okay. So let's kind of talk about some essential things that you need in order to have a podcast. So, you need to make sure that your name is not being used by anybody else.
Yeah.
And your name can be, you can come up with a brand like Small Biz Life or World Builders Anvil. Your show could be, if you have a name, then you can use that, so, entrepreneurness with, me. You can do that if you have a name. I don't have a name, so we have Small Biz Life.
Yeah.
And you see that like some people are doing that, and that can work for you. You also need artwork for your show.
Yep. And I want to get into something right now. We talk about artwork. Maybe you get music or sounds that you want to use during your show. Understand that you must obey intellectual property laws. There are software to help identify intellectual property violations. Just a couple weeks ago, there was a big YouTuber who, when he started off, he never thought a show was going to be any big, but he was doing these sort of daily or weekly YouTube videos, but he was using the likeness of a bear because he essentially went to Google, looked up images for cartoon bears, and was using this bear. The problem was it was actually an intellectual property of an actual TV show. And so later on, it came back to haunt him, and they tried to modify it a little bit. But when the company found his show, and he started gaining followers, started doing merchandising, they went after him, lost his channel temporarily, had to do a lot of begging and pleading to get them to let YouTube reopen his channel, or he would have lost what he had shifted into a full-time job doing.
Right, because he had just quit his job.
He had just quit his job like a month before, and then all of a sudden his channel disappeared.
And I know, like, even when we put this show up on YouTube, we bought the rights to the intro music and the outro music that we use. It's actually the same
Not
song.
exclusive rights, but rights to utilize the music that you hear.
Right. So we bought those rights, and there is like an automatic system in YouTube that checks for copyright violations. And every week, like I have like this little text document that has all the pertinent information.
Mm-hmm.
Every week I have to refute the claim that yes, we have the right to use this.
I don't think, did it happen this last time though, finally? I think maybe they finally.
I think they might have finally fixed it.
Okay. Because I was arguing with Days with YouTube. We finally just got so sick of it. Kristen started a complaint with them and through my email address, which is connected to the account. And then I just started going ballistic because for 10 or 12 weeks, every week we had to waste time refuting copyright claims.
Right. And it was funny because like the company that actually, sold us the song or that has the copyright to the song was like, no, it's not us. It's YouTube.
Yeah.
YouTube automatically does it. So then we had to fight YouTube. So, be aware that there is technology out there that if you're using copyrighted material, you are going to get nailed.
And just remember too, this was especially music, because it's very easy to identify that pattern. You figure we used, I'm going to say 30 seconds of 3 to 4 minute song. And
our voice is over that.
And our voice is going over that. They found it and they nailed the song that we did. It was the exact song, but we had bought the rights so we could back it up and keep our content.
Right. So make sure that your artwork is original. Make sure that your music that you use, you have the rights to use it.
If you buy the stock stuff, make sure that you have the information at your disposal. So if one of these automated systems do start flagging your content, you can fight it because especially in the bigger forums, they're going to take you out.
Right. And make sure that if you buy stock images, if you buy stock music, make sure that you keep that receipt forever.
Yep. That you can verify that you bought a royalty-free, or maybe you're paying royalties, which you probably wouldn't get hit up at that point. But especially if you're doing the royalty-free stuff, make sure you can prove that you have the rights to use it.
Right, because I think the song that we're using,
cool song,
which is a cool song. I like the song. We I think it costs us about $70, but we have lifetime rights to use that music.
And understand when you buy the rights royalty free, it's going to cost you more for the whatever the property is.
Right. So, but these are the kinds of things that you've got to consider. And like, I know like YouTube actually has like free, royalty free music. It's not the greatest stuff in the whole world, but it's there.
Well, it's going to be older.
Right.
Normally, some musicians will create stuff that you can use a Creative Commons license for or something like that. Follow any instructions, but back up. Make sure you're doing it correctly because you don't want, especially if you start getting recognized and people start listening, you don't want to lose it once you get started, especially like us. We love what we're doing. So
right, exactly. So, and artwork is really important because nobody knows exactly how iTunes works. Okay. There's kind of like, there's rumor and speculation and whatnot. But one of the things that has pretty much been confirmed in the podcasting world, there are editors that handle new and noteworthy and
curate it.
Right. There are curators. If your artwork does not look professional or they don't like it, you can never hit new and noteworthy. You can never hit the top of the download charts, no matter what.
You can get 100 reviews a week and get 10,000 downloads and not make new and noteworthy, where you can do a lot lower than that and still hit new and noteworthy. And the idea for the artwork is it does not matter how good it looks on your monitor. It matters how good it looks, especially in the iTunes store, because that's the one place where the artwork will get you the chance to get exposed to a lot of people.
Yeah, so one thing that people did for both of our shows is they took a screenshot of like the category that we wanted to be in and the top podcasts, and then they took our artwork and they put it into one of the slots.
Yeah.
And they said, okay, how does your artwork look if it was in.
Does it pop out? Mm-hmm. And does it look good? You know, does the text bleed over to the border of it? Does it blend in? Like my original artwork, I thought was pretty cool for World Builders Anvil. It was like it was an image of my world, my made up world Gardul on a white background. The text popped out really well. It looked really good. But when you put it on the page, the white blended into the white of iTunes. And so the planet stuck out, but it just didn't look great. And it ended up being completely different.
Right.
I mean, the opposite, literally, where it was a black background with the planet, and I tried to add some space elements into it.
Well, and that's why like we did like super bold colors, because even though our background is white, you know, we're using orange and green as the main colors.
The logo is popping now.
So it pops, right? So, you know, this is something that if you're serious about podcasting, get a designer to do a logo for you.
Unless you have the skill.
Unless you have the skill to do it yourself. Lena Elizer did our logo for Small Biz Life, and I will put a link to the show notes for her website. But she did a really good job, you know, making it pop for us.
Yeah, and actually mine did too, but it was with a lot of feedback. And I did do mine on my own. It's possible. I had enough skills and the material to put together.
Right. Well, that's the thing. You had the world, and you had software that would take your world and make it into
and I understood a giant world makes perfect sense for that show.
Exactly.
Especially a fake world.
Exactly. Okay, so those are some things. All right, so what you actually need to record and post your show.
Yeah.
So you're going to need a computer. Really, tablets and smartphones are not, they're okay for the recording part, but for the editing piece,
it's not possible to do, but I think it would add a lot of time. And trust me, if your show is 15 minutes, it will take you, if you're lucky, 15 minutes to edit the show.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're going to need a microphone. Now, we started off with a Blue Yeti.
Lovely USB. You plug it right into the computer. I do advise a stand or a mic arm. It's just, it'll be more comfortable to talk to than if you stand it up off of a table. But that was a great mic. And the first several of my episodes sounded very good. Especially for a solo show, it was perfect. Yeah.
Right. You know, even if you have like a really good like USB headphone mic, like I have a Logitech mic that I use for all my YouTube videos, you want something that is going to record the sound very clearly.
Yeah, because you have to understand, when it's audio, that's all they have. So if they can't understand you, if your audio is off, they're not going to listen.
Right, exactly. So, you know, now because there's the two of us recording together, we actually have a soundboard that all of the sound goes into, and then we plug that soundboard into the computer. Yeah. Okay. So, and we have ATR 2100s, right, for the mics?
I believe so.
And they actually have a USB also that you can hook into these.
Yeah, if you want, you could use these to do either USB. And they're nice, cheap mics because they're dynamic and it'll blend your voice well. And if you don't have a great sound background, it's easier to get a good sound out of it. You won't get a great sound, but you'll get a good, consistent sound as long as your setup is correct and you're using that mic.
Right. And the Yeti, you know, you can find deals on it. I think the Yeti was probably about $120. The ATR 2100s are about $60 a piece. So, you know, it just kind of depends on what you can get. A Logitech headset for $30. You know, it really just depends on how much you want to invest in this process.
Yeah.
So, you know, you have a lot of different options. And like I said, we will link all of the equipment recommendations in the show notes on smallbizlife.com. So you're going to want to check those out. So the next thing you need is a piece of software to record your show. So we have a PC, we record right into Audacity.
Very expensive.
It's free.
Oh, yeah.
Free. I like free. Free is a good thing. You can use Adobe Audition if you have Adobe. You can, if you have a Mac, you can use GarageBand. So there are a lot of different options out there for recording.
Yeah.
The reason that we use Audacity is it's free. It was fairly easy to learn. There are a lot of YouTube videos out there on how to use Audacity.
Yeah, I would say Audacity and GarageBand are probably the two most commonly used for podcasting, even though I would imagine the higher end people are using something like Adobe. But understand, typically when it's the better, more professional software, it usually comes with being more complicated.
Right. So, I mean, this is, the great thing with Audacity is I can drag in, the intro to the show. I can drag in the outro of the show. I can cut things out. I can reduce background noise. There's lots of different things that we can do with it.
And one of the suggestions we think about recording too, you'll usually have two options, mono or stereo. If you're a voice-driven show, you probably don't want to go to stereo for just voices. And yes, it would sound better, but the amount of additional value that will be gained will be very small for the listener, unless you have a lot of music. Because and for the additional bandwidth, most hosting, which we'll get to in a second, is costed out by the amount of bandwidth used to upload your audio files.
Right. It's based on audio file size. And so if, we record all of our episodes in mono, stereo is going to make the file sizes much larger.
Yeah.
And typically what I find in the podcast groups I'm in is that when people have an issue with file size, it's because they're recording in stereo. For what we're doing here, if it's just voice, you don't need that.
Even with your intros.
Right.
And it's great. It takes 30 seconds. If you have them that's stereo that you want to convert in, you can just right click on it and say a split to mono. And then you can get rid of one of the 2 channels worth of data. So
once you've recorded your podcast, you need somewhere to host it. Do not put your podcast on your website hosting.
Unless you own the server, because the hosting company, if you get popular, is going to notice and they're going to ban you because you just violated the terms of service.
Right. So, the way you've got to kind of think of this is, your website has its own hosting, your podcast has its own hosting, videos have their own hosting, everything has its own place to be.
Yeah.
You're not going to upload videos to WordPress. You're going to put them on YouTube, or you're going to put them in Vimeo, or you're going to, use Wistia.
Minds.com. Minds.com is a new one.
Oh, really? Okay. And then you're going to put the link onto your website. Podcasting works the same way. You're going to have a host for your podcast. And then the cool thing is that, they all have their own players. If you want people to be able to listen, so if you go to smallbizlife.com, you'll see you can actually listen to the show right from there. But iTunes does not host your podcast for you.
No.
All of these services, whether it's Google Play Podcast, whether it's Stitcher or iTunes or
everything but
iHeartRadio, they are all basically all they're doing is they're taking the RSS feed. So if you guys listen to our email basics episode, we said that you could set up an RSS feed from WordPress to send out new blog posts to your email list.
Yeah.
This is kind of the same thing. You upload it to Libsyn and it actually creates a feed for you. And all iTunes does is pull that feed and then shows all the episodes. Okay, so that's really all that iTunes is doing.
Yeah.
So
and iTunes is the important one to be in because one, it's the biggest place people get podcasts from still. But also, if you go to ancillary services, like iHeartRadio, they will either interact with your host, but a lot of times, a lot of the podcast players interact directly with iTunes. So I download Podcast Republic on my phone where I listen to a podcast through because there was nothing else. Well, there were some of the other ones at the time, but it gave me all of the iTunes library on my Android phone before Google Play started carrying stuff.
Right. And that's the thing is that a lot of these players use the iTunes feed.
Yeah.
in order to be able to play your podcast. So we use Libsyn for our podcast hosting. You know, there are like SoundCloud is another one. Burberry is another one. There are a whole bunch of them out there. Most of the podcasters I know use Libsyn. Yeah. We had the opportunity to meet the guys from Libsyn at Podcast Movement. But they were phenomenal guys. Their customer service is great. We've never had an issue with the servers being down. Because so many podcasters use them, they get, they were one of the first ones to say, you know what, you can just like click a button to go to iHeart. If and iHeart will have to accept your podcast, but they have a relationship with iHeartRadio that makes it really easy to submit. Another thing that I really like about their service is that they will automatically upload your podcast with an image to YouTube.
Yes.
So we don't have to do that anymore. So there's just, there's some really nice things that they help us automate that I just absolutely love. And their player's really solid. So, Libsyn starts at $5 a month.
If you're going to do a weekly show that is 30 minutes, you're probably going to need at least a $15 one.
Right. So, we're actually, for your show, you use the $20 one, which gives you a little bit more space and better analytics.
A lot better analytics.
Yeah. We're going to end up moving our show to that level.
I mean, the thing is, if you can afford the extra $5, I would start the $20 one, but the $15 will probably have enough bandwidth for most people if you record a mono, for like a 30 to an hour shows weekly.
Yeah, like we've never really had an issue with bandwidth at the $15 level.
And the good thing is they don't try nickel and dime you. So I have heard this from podcasters that if you go slightly over, they don't kill you. They don't charge you extra. But if you consistently go over, they're going to approach you to upgrade your account.
Right. So, so you're going to need that hosting.
And there's one other one if you have no budget for it. It's called archive.org, I believe. And you can actually upload any kind of file to them. The problem is you'll never be able to edit it again. But you'll be able to create feeds. Some podcasters have started there. Typically, they will end up moving to another service to get analytics. And you don't have control over it once it goes out there. And so some people don't like that. But that is an option if you have zero budget for hosting.
Right. So then once you have your show in Libsyn or SoundCloud or whatever you're using for your hosting, then you need to tell the services that your podcast exists. So this is another one that people are like, okay, so I went to iTunes and my show's not there. Okay, well, iTunes doesn't pull every show from Libsyn. You actually have to apply to be on iTunes.
Yes. And iTunes is the most complicated one to join, probably.
Right. So, when we started the show, we applied to iTunes, we applied to Stitcher, then Google Play came out, so we applied to that. When Libsyn developed their relationship with iHeart, we applied for that, and that took a while. That actually took months.
Yeah, but I think part of it was just inundation.
Right. So they got inundated with a lot of podcasts. Google Play took like 6 months, but they collected a whole bunch of podcasts before they were ready to launch. And then when they launched, we all went.
Yeah.
So, but you have to actually apply to these services.
And the thing is, when you want to launch your podcast, you have to, to be safe, 72 hours before you go live with your podcast, you want to submit it to iTunes at that point. Because it could take up to that length of time for it to happen. And it's not like, if you ever change your name servers for where your URL points, and they're like, this could take up to 48 hours, and then 2 minutes later it works. I don't think that would ever happen applying to iTunes for podcasting.
Yeah, that's the one thing that's pretty rough is that you can't say like, okay, I want to apply to iTunes and I want to launch on this date.
No.
Because once iTunes accepts your podcast,
you're live.
Okay. So that's one thing. And when you release your podcast, you can't submit to iTunes without any episodes. You have to have episodes that are live in your hosting in order for iTunes to accept you. So that's another thing. When you launch your podcast, there are going to be a ton of different directories that you can put your podcast in. I've found that they don't make a whole lot of difference.
No.
Being on different platforms makes a difference. You know, we've had people who found us through iHeartRadio.
Woohoo.
Awesome. I think that's great. But people don't typically go to podcast directories. They go to iTunes or they go to Stitcher or they go to Google Play and they search there.
Or in the app they're using, which probably uses iTunes.
Right. So don't spend a ton of time trying to get your podcast on every single directory that's out there.
And I found I think there's one like Podbean or something like that. There's a different one where I've seen a lot of traffic go to them, but I never applied to them. That they found and started taking my show, and I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
I get the downloads for it. So.
And that does happen.
Yeah.
You know, if your podcast, you know, like if you hit new and noteworthy, you can, you know, you will start to see that things will pick you up. So the other question that we get a lot is how do you get into new and noteworthy?
Yeah.
Because that's you know, the big thing.
And this is one of the keys. And you want to get into new and noteworthy. Like I said, I believe in organic growth, but if you get free exposure, new and noteworthy will get you much higher numbers than you would otherwise. But you gotta hustle to get into new and noteworthy. The most important thing, outside of artwork, which will pretty much only keep you out of new and noteworthy, is reviews. It's actually not your download velocity. It is your reviews. And if you can come in and get 20 plus reviews right around the time you launch, you will almost inevitably, and both shows did this, they popped right up into new and noteworthy above the fold. They were in the first two rows. So most of the time, if you would go to iTunes when especially World Builders Anvil was there, that show was constantly above the fold, which means when someone opens it up, the first thing they see in iTunes is new and noteworthy. If they're in my categories, they would have seen my show right there at the top.
Yeah, and that's a really great way for people to find you.
Yeah.
You know, with this show, we hit new and noteworthy on the first day.
Yeah.
And that's because we talked about the show before it came out. We teased people. And
the thing is, it's kind of like if you're doing a Kickstarter, you need the people who are going to back you, that you know we're going to back you, to all do it immediately on that first day to help boost you up. Same thing in iTunes. You know, it's like you want to have 20 names at least. If you can get 40, it's even better because 20 of them will probably not remember. But get 20 people, you know, who are going to review you day one, or that first weekend you're out, that first couple of days at least, because that will pop you into new and noteworthy. And if you can keep a velocity of reviews coming in, you know, afterwards, where you're getting at least 5 more a week, that'll probably keep you around that spot the whole time.
Right.
But also part of it too is timing. You know, and if NPR decides to launch 30 new shows in that category the same week, you're going to be in trouble.
Then you're doomed. Well, and that was the thing that was really hard about, you know, the categories we were in, because we were in business,
which there's a lot of,
technology, and education. Because when you go into iTunes, you can pick 3 categories and pick 3 categories.
Well, you have to do that in your host in Libsyn.
Okay. So you pick the 3 categories that you want to be in. Everybody's in education. I mean, that seems to be like the default.
That's the third category for everyone. Like World Builders Anvil's third category is education.
Right. Yeah. So, you know, keep in mind, like the education, you know, category is really hard to break through. And we did do that a number of times through the...
Business and technology are probably 2 of the biggest areas of podcast out there.
Right. So, you know, but Jeff's suggestion that, you know, you kind of have your pre-launch group of people. And that's what we did, is we made sure that people knew that the podcast was coming. When the podcast came, we let everybody know. Rate and review is really important. And
or if you have if you have other friends who are podcasters, they'll all understand, and they will be the ones who will definitely do it. You know, So you give them an honest review, they'll give you an honest review. That will help.
Yes. So, if you're going to go out and podcast, make sure that you're building connections with other podcasters before you start. And, be ready like on that launch day to let people know. And, on that launch day, you're going to be obnoxious. You really are.
Yeah.
Because if you want to hit new and noteworthy and get that lift off, ask people to subscribe, ask people to review. And, we ask people to subscribe a lot now. Reviews, they're cool. I love when you guys review the show, but it's not something that I really
personally, we prefer the direct feedback in either the groups or an email.
Right. So,
but it does help still, but not. And that's when we get to a real top ranked show. That isn't a huge thing.
Right. It's just not really on my radar anymore. But when we were trying to get into new and noteworthy, I was all over the place.
Yeah, I lick your shoes if you review my show.
So, and then it's recording good content.
Yeah.
That's really the thing.
That's listenable.
Right. But have fun with your show. No, it's funny because one of the reasons that Accounting in Focus does well on YouTube is because I have fun with it. I'm teaching accounting. So, but I've watched, some of the videos out there and they're painful.
Yeah.
And I've listened to some podcasts that are painful to listen to. And you got to have fun with it. And you got to think, what? Would I want to listen to this show for 30 minutes to an hour every week?
Even if you're a very, very serious, sober subject, you can't apply that emotion 30 minutes a week to someone else's life. There needs to be some fun and levity to help relax as well too. So understand that, even if your show isn't meant to be fun and bantery, you need something to help relax people who are watching your show too, even when it's an important topic.
Right. And the last thing that I think is really important, and maybe we should talk about this at the beginning of the show. There are very few podcasters that get rich just from podcasting.
Yeah.
It is difficult to get sponsorship or get commercials on your podcast.
Yep. If you want to get to that easy, go straight to YouTube.
Right. YouTube is a much easier venue to monetize. What a podcast will do for you is it will allow you to build your brand, build relationships with people so that you can sell your other products and services.
Yeah.
But don't think that, you're going to grow this podcast and make a tremendous amount of money directly off the podcast. Yeah. That is very rare. So, I just kind of want to put that out there. And I don't want to end the show on a downer.
Well, there's one more thing that we should really cover.
Okay, what's that?
And that's editing the show at the end. There's always going to be some level of editing that you're going to need to do. And I don't want to go through necessarily all of the steps. There are many different ways to do it. There's another piece of software called Levelator 2. It's no longer supported, but it still does its job very well. Better than some paid ones I've seen online that sort of have taken the place of it. But, if you can take the noise out of your show, we do very light editing on our shows. We take out when Kristen, she'll cuss for 30 minutes. Sometimes we have to cut it out. But besides that, we don't cut a lot of content from the show out. But other people do a little bit more. But once you have the length of the show to where you want it to be, and you reduce the noise with Audacity, taking the background noise that leaks into the show out. We put into Levelator. That part takes 5 minutes, and it helps make the voices more rich, more level. So even though I speak in a lot larger range than Kristen does, once we get it through Levelator, my volume doesn't shoot way above hers.
Yeah.
Which causes her to cuss for 30 minutes straight.
And with editing, don't edit out all the ums. You're going to mess up. You're going to have long pause. I mean, I usually take the pauses out if the pauses are too long when I'm trying to think of what I'm going to say next.
Occasionally, like if I will have a and then I might cut out a little bit of it, but in general, it's like you need to practice so you stop doing that so much. You use certain words, certain phrases, to that's one of, I think both of us use that one as well too.
Oh, we totally do.
But you get better at doing it. It's like anything, your first episodes aren't going to be great, but make the content good.
Yeah, I think that's really key, is that if you've got decent audio and you've got really good content, then people are going to listen. As now, the last thing, having a podcast is just like any other content you have. It's just like a blog. You need to promote the hell out of it.
Yep.
Okay. And, the way that we do that, we've said that we're big fans of Edgar. We use Edgar for that. And it's funny because we'll notice when when one of the episodes goes out on social media, and the way we have it set up is that an episode will go out on some channels in the morning and then other social media channels in the afternoon.
We try to spread out to hit different people.
Right. But we'll be like, wow, this episode did really well today. Oh, it's all over. It's on our social media.
Yeah.
And so having that consistency of posting of episodes, it drives traffic.
Because I think on like my Twitter, 4 times a day, I believe, I promote shows. And the thing I find is, some people get a little worried that you're going to overwhelm people. The life of your tweet's 30 seconds. And I do agree, if that's all you're doing, it's pretty bad, because if someone clicks through to follow you and all they see is you're feeding out episodes, they might not follow you. But it'll show up. It's more likely it might show up. And if someone catches it and they retweet it and you get a little traction, sometimes the other thing is you'll see you're having a good day in your downloads and you go look at the detail and you're like, episode 14.
Right.
Oh, that went out in Edgar as our evergreen content today. Okay.
And Edgar makes it really easy to do that. And we're looking at, there's a new player that we're going to be looking at. And I shared it in the Facebook group a while back, but we're going to be playing around with that.
Social media share, not player.
Well, there's a new player in the social media sharing game. Sorry. So we're going to be playing around with that to see.
We'll let you know.
Supposed to be able to recycle content as well. And that's really the big thing.
And that's the big thing that's helped both of our shows start to keep at least a slow growth going all of the time, instead of a slow decline. Because especially when you come out of New and Noteworthy, if you hit it, the more you hit it, you're going to drop when you come out. Because not everyone is going to listen to your show is your avatar or is going to even care what you're talking about. So, it's like, I think I kept about 1/3 of, the people who listened to me in New and Noteworthy. And then I kind of was flat and maybe slightly down for about 6 to maybe 12 months afterwards. I had a few growth months in there, but in general, the overall trend, if you looked at it, was maybe slightly down. And then when I started using Edgar and consistently putting out my stuff and nothing else, my show started to grow. And both shows started to grow.
Right. No, Edgar was really a game changer for that. So
it doesn't replace the outreach and the networking at all, but it helps keep the attrition, at least at the level we're at, for downloads, going up instead of level or going down.
Right. So that's, I know a lot of people say, Edgar is really expensive, but to be able to put out content, every single day and know that we've got multiple episodes being shared on social media every single day.
Because you can do certain things with like if this then that to be able to do like when you have new content come out and do things like that. But the problem is that doesn't help get your evergreen content out there.
Right. And that's the thing, a lot of people are like, oh, nobody's going to read my old posts. Trust me.
It's like we still get meals outside of the box and payment-free life. People are like, are you still making things? No.
Well, it's funny because every time our email list basics episode goes out, we see a spike in the downloads for that episode.
I've had, there's two things that will do it. Either there's a few that like the headlines suck, but they have good images, or they have good headlines that speak to your audience. Sometimes you think they're good headlines and then it doesn't really do anything for you.
Yeah, I found that.
But, you know, the thing is, when they come back there's certain shows, whenever they hit Edgar, and sometimes it's the same people retweeting it again for the 15th time.
Yep.
Because they either love the image, they love the episode. I don't know why. But they do. Sometimes it's the same people will share out the same episode.
Yep. So, you know, we hope that we have inspired you to think about podcasting. It's a really fun medium. You know, we love interacting with you this way. If you have any questions, the best thing to do is to ask in our Facebook group. If you are not in the Facebook group, it's facebook.com/groups/smallbizlife. And a quick tech tip, okay? Ooh. If you like listening to podcasts and you want to consume more podcasts, most players will allow you to speed up the transmission of the podcast. Now, if you listen
this helps with editing too.
Right, we do this with editing as well. If you listen to us at about 1.5, we kind of sound like characters from South Park.
Do you go that high?
Yeah, when I'm editing, I do.
I'll only do 1 point. I don't have to try it higher.
But, you know, it saves me a ton of time when editing the show. Yeah. And it lets you consume content faster. It's just, you know, everybody that you listen to is either going to sound like a chipmunk or, you know,
a South Park character.
But since we like South Park, that's okay. I'm all right with that. So, you know,
she sounds like Cartman.
Yeah, no. I sound like Wendy Testerberger,
yes,
actually.
Yes, you do.
So, you know, give that a try, because if you can speed up, you know, the voice a little bit. And it's kind of funny because when I listen to our podcast now at normal speed, I'm like, oh my God, this is so slow. Like I have to talk faster. But, you know, most people like the speed, so I'm going with that.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's kind of my tech tip this week. You know, look to see if you can, and just start like accelerating it a little bit, because if you can cut off 10 minutes on an hour podcast, that gives you 10 minutes to listen to something else.
That's right.
So another episode of our show, of course.
Or go over to the World Builders Anvil, and because everyone needs to learn how to do fantasy world building.
There you go. And your show, it's just fun.
Yes.
That's the thing. If you're a geek, check out World Builders Anvil.
So some of the episodes will maybe be weird if you're not a world builder, but you know, a lot of the episodes, you know, we just take a look at stuff through the lens of world builders sometimes. So,
and you know, the thing is, it's like if you're, I notice like a lot of geeks really like that behind the scenes. You know, like how do you create this kind of stuff? How do you, you know, how did you come up with that religion or that monster or whatever? And you know, that's what I find. So, you know, go check out World Builders Anvil. It's a cool show. Not that I'm biased, but
I hear the one host is really sexy. That's me. And humble.
And humble too. Yes, very humble. So thanks so much for joining us again, and we will see you next time. Thank you for listening to Small Biz Life. If you enjoyed the show, please take a few minutes to rate and review the show on iTunes or Stitcher. Please visit smallbizlife.com to view today's show notes, take this week's poll, join the Facebook community, follow us on Twitter, or submit a question for the mailbag. Support the show by checking the resources page or by going to smallbizlife.com/Amazon whenever you shop.
This was Small Biz Life.